right, guys, and we are live. This is Justice is a Process, and we are going live today. We are going to check out a video today from Court TV where the Tim Ferriter case out of Florida is discussed. This is the case known as the boy in a box case, and it is a crazy one. It's where a father locked his son or his adopted son in a box in his garage. He was convicted of multiple counts of child abuse last month, and he's facing up to 40 years in prison. We're going to hear the commentators from Court TV. I'm going to react. We're going to talk about it. You feel free to leave comments if anybody pops in, say hello. We're going to watch this. We're going to react, and we're going to talk about what is the sentence we think Tim Ferriter will receive. He's going to be sentenced on the 16th of this month. I'll be covering that live, watching it with you. So let's get the video up here on the screen and get it started and start watching.
15th Judicial Circuit Criminal Division in and for
This was the
County,
verdict.
Florida, case number 22 CF 001136 BMB Division B. State of Florida versus Timothy Dunn Ferriter. Defendant. Verdict. We, the jury, find as follows. As to count one, we find the defendant guilty of aggravated child abuse as charged in the information. As to count two, we find the defendant guilty of false imprisonment as charged in the information. As to count three, we find the defendant guilty of neglect of a child as charged in the information.
When that verdict was read, he did not believe.
So
I think he was the only one in the courtroom that probably didn't think he would be
2023 in West Palm Beach, Florida. Signed by the jury for
his friend right there behind him, his wife, is reacting.
Oh, that was Tim Ferriter as he was found guilty of aggravated child abuse, child neglect, and false imprisonment. This guy is the father who was convicted of locking his adopted son in an 8-by-8-foot box in their garage. Throughout the trial.
That's right, guys. He locked his son in an 8-by-8-foot box in his garage. He was now, in the situation was he would lock him in the box overnight, sometimes as much as 12 hours at a time with nothing but with a bucket. Now, it did have electricity. It had lights, but the lights were all controlled outside the room. The locks were on the outside of the room. It was really a devastating case in terms of just thinking about what this young man went through. Now, on the flip side of this, the young man had behavioral problems. He had known problems that were known by the state Child Protective Services, at least in the state of Arizona, where they had lived, and they just moved to Florida about 6 weeks before all of this came out. And why Tim Ferriter decided that this was the way to solve this problem, I have no idea. Although I think it was a mix of just a terrible idea and just not knowing what to do, and then he ended up making a horrific decision that I don't think was helping this young man at all. The question now, though, is this is the point. Finding him guilty was the easy part. How long do you punish him for? And I'm going to share with you at the end here tonight. I'll share with you what my thoughts are. Let's watch this video a little bit.
Ferriter rarely displayed any emotion. And as we just saw during the reading of the verdict, he remained pretty composed. He's facing up to 40 years in prison now. And during his last court appearance, he was physically shaking. Look at him, visibly scared, entirely different demeanor.
Yeah, I watched that hearing. I wasn't obviously broadcasting anything or reacting, but I watched that hearing, and I was shocked at the difference between the man we saw all throughout that trial, confidently walking out of the courtroom, packing up his bags, iPhone in his hands, not very cocky, very confident, and then seeing the man who had just spent about a week in jail and had the realization that this was his life, this was potentially his life. He was hoping to get out of jail on bail for about 6 weeks before sentencing. There is a chance, I do believe, the guidelines do allow potentially that he could avoid jail time, but it's very unlikely it will happen. Although I do think there is I heard the state say there was a mandatory minimum in this case, I think of possibly 5 years, but I think the judge can depart. But I don't, but he's got to have good reason to it. I don't think in this case that the judge is going to depart in this case below the 5-year minimum. So I think he's looking at least 5 years. Uh, you know, anyways, let's listen to the
Meaner
rest.
there in his prison garb. Now, what I'd like to do is put that same footage side by side with an earlier video of him. On the left is Tim Ferriter 3 days before his trial. Calm, cool, collected. On the right, same footage just a week after his conviction. He was trying to get bond to get out of jail. Judge denied that. Now, it's important to remember that he was out on bond during the time of his trial. So what we just saw was the result of his first experiences being locked up in a different kind of box. So what could have happened in that 1 week of incarceration to cause such a change in his demeanor? Let's hear from a felon who served multiple years in the Florida penitentiary system and gave Court TV his predictions on what prison will be like for Tim Ferriter.
They'll smell the fear on him, put it to you that way. He's not going to do too good. You know, it depends on what region of Florida he goes in. The northern region of Florida is a lot more violent than the southern region. So it depends on where he goes, how they're going to try to take advantage of him. A lot of inmates these days like to finesse, like try to sell you drugs or things of that nature, you know. But then up in the northern region, they'll do things like hand you a list of canteen items to go to the window and get. And if you don't come back with that list.
I remember watching what you're seeing right here. Of course, you're also listening to this gentleman who's been in prison before, but I remember watching this process because I watched the verdict live. And I remember it was really interesting. I'd encourage you to go back and watch the entire video because in this Florida courtroom, something you don't normally get to see happened here. And that was he didn't leave the courtroom to go get the mugshot or the fingerprinting. He actually went to an area that was still on camera and sat there. And just after the verdict, he got to go give his wife a hug and a kiss, and then it was like you could start to see the realization. And I think that shot right there, that's the realization that his whole life has just changed. Everything is over with that he knew about, everything he thought he knew, everything he'd experienced, it's over. And it was like his family was literally, he could reach out and touch them. And he's over here in the corner getting ready to go to jail, getting ready to start this new journey. And then you see the difference of he walks out of the courtroom and it was like you could just see that person that's walking out of that courtroom will never be the same person ever again. And it was really, really interesting to see that metamorphosis. All right, let's check this out here.
Then, you know, he'll be beaten pretty bad or even worse. They don't have air conditioning in prison other than 2 prisons in the state of Florida for males. So he's not going to have to worry about any of that. Now, as far as the living conditions go, he'll be in about a 10 by 12 cell, sharing a room with another person. The toilet's going to be right there. They're not very clean environments. As far as things go with the type of charge he's got, he's not headed for anything nice.
Sounds a lot like the box he had his son locked up in. His sentencing set for November 16th. Mark your calendar. Court TV will be there. Again, he's looking at up to 40 years in prison. Let's bring in our tank now. Attorneys Lori Murray, Rick King, and Michael Sterling on the program. What do we think the judge might do with this guy and why? We got a first-time offender on our hands, but very bad child abuse case that we all watched playing out during his trial that we televised here. Lori Murray, let me start with you. Your thoughts, please.
Well, I have such mixed feelings because I'm such an empath, and I think I'm frozen. Am I frozen? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yep.
Okay, I think my camera's frozen. Sorry. But I have such an empathetic feeling for this guy because of the way he was shaking. I know going into prison is not easy. I've seen the criminal justice system up front. But at the same time, it was a terrible crime. I think that this being his first offense, that the judge will give him the minimum. And I think he's kicking himself for not taking that plea offer, which he should.
Right, Lori. Thank you for bringing that up because it was a sweetheart deal. It was so good. So good. But now he is sunk. Rick King, what do you think the judge is going to do?
And what they're referencing here, guys, is he had an offer on the table for 2 years. Now, the issue at hand, according to his attorneys, which came out in some interviews after the case, was that it was not quite as straightforward. It wasn't quite as a sweetheart deal as they thought because he was going to have to testify against his wife, and he was going to, or I don't know if he's going to have to testify. It had to do with his wife. I believe the wife was going to actually have to plead guilty with him, but they were not making a guarantee on her sentence. They were giving him a 2-year max. And again, remember, what he got convicted of in this case requires a 5-year mandatory minimum, according to the prosecutor that was talking to the judge directly after, which was the reason why they said there's a mandatory minimum. Therefore, he's not eligible for bail in the state of Florida. But they were going to be dropping the charge, I guess, with the mandatory minimum of 5 years. He was going to get 2 years in prison. And then his wife was going to, I believe, have to plead guilty to something. But he was worried about the wife because the state of Florida would not stipulate what that sentence was going to be if his wife had to plead guilty. So it's one of these deals where he was wanting to protect his wife. So he just didn't give it any mind. I don't think he thought he was going to get convicted because I think he thought, hey, again, it was a nuanced case. It was one that was talking once again about intent. What was his intent? Was his intent to abuse the young man, or was it just misguided parenting? Obviously, locking your kid in the garage. He had a video camera where he was screaming and put his hands on his child. Again, he's probably going to look back because getting that, if he gets 5 years, or I think he's going to get somewhere. This will be a good time to say, I think he's going to get 15 years in prison. That's my prediction. I don't think the judge is going to give him 40. I think he's going to give him 15. I think it's going to probably work out to about 5, or potential parole at about 5. But I think he's going to get a 15-year sentence, and then he's going to have the opportunity to get out in about 5. That's my thought. Maybe he'll get a little bit less. Maybe he'll get 10, but I think 15 just seems to be with what he did to the child. What happened here? You got to make a statement that you can't do the things that you can't lock your kid in a box in the garage, regardless of what's going on. So we'll see what happens, though. But let's get back
with him when the time comes.
Well, he's going to get at least 48 months, that's for sure. So he's 48 months set to go. What Judge Coates does over that? So I know Judge Coates is a very fair judge. If you lost your trial, you're gonna get sentenced appropriately. I don't think that he's gonna be very happy. He's gonna wish he took that 2-year deal back in the day. But that shaking right there, he hasn't even left Palm Beach County yet. So he still has to report to prison somewhere. So if he's shaking like that after 1 week or 2 weeks in the Palm Beach County jail, he's in for a very rude awakening.
You're right, my friend. You are right. And I had to remind myself of the exact terms of the deal. Rick, thank you for pointing it out. So the state attorney's office offered him 24 months of confinement in state prison, plus 5 years of probation to follow that. Pretty fair deal, which he rejected. Of course, that was his right to go to trial, and we saw how well that turned out for him. Michael Sterling, you've served as a prosecutor at the federal level. You do defense work now. What do you think his attorneys might try to argue at the time of sentencing? How might they try to convince the court to give him a more lenient sentence than probably most of the general public thinks this guy deserves?
Well, I think what they're probably going to lean on the most is what prosecutors usually lean on, right? Which is the victim impact statement. So I think the defense attorneys are going to point to the testimony of the son, who is the victim in this case, who said that he thought his dad was doing the best he could and shouldn't be punished. And I think they'll probably lean on that quite a bit.
Right. I think you're right about that. Yeah, he didn't blame them. It was so sad hearing the child say, I don't blame Tim and Tracy. They were doing the best they could. And it was just all around so sad. Got to leave it there for now. November 16th, we'll see Tim Ferriter back in court. Maybe he'll be shaken then like he was shaken that week after he was convicted.
Did you have any contact with the thugs?
All right. So, what bothers me though is what this guy did was terrible, no question. It was a horrible thing, but I don't like to see the celebration there where it's like, oh, let's see this guy shaking. Look, he's going through a horrible situation. He made a bad decision. He mistreated his child. He's going to get punished. I think it just tells you how bad, how big of a shock it is when somebody like him, who, from all indications, he had everything going for him. He had, uh, wife, kids, nice house, living in Palm Beach, good job, lots of money, traveled the world, and really made some bad decisions. So just because you're a parent of a child doesn't mean you can do anything you want, and he's learned the hard way on that. So I think there is some messages that they want to send out there, but I think also too, sometimes you got to look at everything. As I said in the Charlie Adelson case, you got to look at everything in a vacuum, and not everything is always as simple as A to Z. But I think this guy's going to definitely regret not taking the plea deal. I'm thinking 15 years. We'll see how it is. You mark it right here. Uh, 15 is the prediction for justice as a process, and for him, justice prevailed. I mean, in a sense, now he's still got his appeal process. He's going to go to sentencing, and the process will still move on. So justice isn't done with him yet. He's going to have to go to the Florida penitentiary though for a little while and see how the appeal goes. I do believe it does strike me that after watching the trial, I believed walking away from it that there was some fertile ground for appeal due to some rulings that the judge made. I can't remember off the top of my head. I have to go back and look at my notes on that, but I know there were some things that I walked away and said, "Yeah, this guy's got a good potential appeal." Uh, again, appeals are long shots. Uh, but there'll at least be some things to discuss. So anyways, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this presentation. Put in the notes what you think. What's your prediction for Tim Ferriter's sentencing? How long will he receive? What do you think he's looking at? Let me know. Put it in the comments. And guys, I'll be, of course, talking to you soon. Check out my coverage. I've got day 2 of the Lori Phillips analysis out. Day 3 will be coming out hopefully tomorrow. I'm working on getting through day 3 right now, and getting my notes and thoughts together on that. And I'm going to be coming to you with that. Check me out. Check out the channel. If you just found this, hit that subscribe button. Hit a like on this video to get it around. And of course, interact. Let me know your thoughts. We're going to be covering trials, covering the justice process. Because remember, justice is not an outcome. It's never the outcome. It is a process. And that's what justice is about, guys. At the end of the day, justice always prevails when the process works and is allowed to work and is fair. Anyways, guys, as always, I'll talk to you soon. In the meantime, let justice prevail.